You know those games that come along every so often where they present as simple, cozy, overall fun experiences to just curl up and play for an hour or so at the end of the day to unwind? But then you play them and you realize you were sold on a false pretense, and that instead of a way to rest and relax at the end of the day, you now work a graveyard shift in a digital world that never seems to end? Well, Level 5's Fantasy Life series has tricked me into that twice now, and I could not be happier about it, despite it being an actual real-life problem with how much of my limited attention span the game commands. Like, it holds onto my idiot mind so much with its never-go-up progression that layers each and every aspect of gameplay, and with how well intertwined different jobs feel, how much they lend to one another, how much you advance one life by progressing with another, it's tailor-made to take every single ounce of your focus and motivation and channel it into an endless chain of just one more isms, just one more quest to complete, just one more meal to cook, just one more shrine to finish up, just one more ore deposit to break open, but everything leads into something else, and that is the true beauty of Fantasy Life I. This game has an iron grip on every waking moment of my life. Even when it's turned off and I'm doing boring reality stuff, I'm thinking of how best to manage my many lives when I jump back into it next. I'm listening to the OST on YouTube. I'm daydreaming about my boyfriend, Colin, who I've claimed he's mine, by the way. It's the kind of game that when you turn it off, it's not the end of the play session because there's just such a large wealth of things to do that it feels potentially endless in its content. Like, even as I write this script, I have my Switch next to me because every 5 minutes of real-life time that goes by after defeating an overworld boss, it'll respawn, and I'm just casually grinding through a boss every time I think to check my Switch as I go through my day. I'm not even playing the game right now as a sit-down and play session, and yet making it just a little further by grinding out resources on one overworld boss as I do mature grown-up stuff like making dumb internet videos is the only light exposure to the game I can allow myself to prevent me going on a 200-hour-at-a-time adventure. It's just that good. That's the kind of game it was on the 3DS, and it's the kind of game it is now, but like times a billion. It's incredible. Even if you weren't lucky enough to have been sucked in by the original charming 3DS game back in 2014, I can't encourage that everyone even a little curious about it give this new entry a try enough. Fantasy Life I, The Girl Who Steals Time, is marketed as a slow life RPGs, and maybe in a lot of ways it is. It's a fairly cozy game, after all. Of the 14 lives you can choose from, only 4 are combat-focused. And though combat is unavoidable in the game for story and life progression, it's not the one and only focus of the game, and really not even the main one. You can put the swath of lives the game has to offer into 3 generally interchangeable flavors: combat, collecting, and crafting. The 3 C's of life fantasy. And the game gives you the freedom to pick or not pick any of these lives that you want. You do have a default life called Brand New, which is technically a combat class, if only because it lets your character hit things with a stick. And while it is very funny to hit giant dragons and stuff with a stick, it's far from the best pick for combat that you have at your disposal. I think of the 3 C's, combat has the most variety overall. You have the Paladin life, giving you a sword and shield for balanced up close and personal fighting, the Mercenary life, giving you a giant sword with which to damage your enemies slowly as they hit you 50 times for each of your gigantic meaty swings, and the Hunter and Magician lives, which allow for ranged attacks that are physical and magical, respectively. Personally, I love the ranged classes. Using the bow gives you access to debuff the enemy and the staff to self-buffs. Plus, the distance really helps out in so much of the combat. Outside of combat's 4 lives, well, technically 5 if you count bashing sheep over and over with a stick, you'll be using the collecting lives in the overworld. The mining and woodcutting lives are almost identical. Circle the thing you want to break, find the sweet spot, and slap it around a little bit. The angler life will similarly utilize a circle to find the sweet spot for catching a fish, just with a quick flick of the left stick to find it rather than a slower trot around your static enemy. The farming life is new, and, well, it's no Rune Factory or Stardew Valley, I'll say that much. It's a lot more half-baked than the rest of the lives, like it was tacked on at the last second of the concept phase because Animal Crossing put it in an update. By the way, this game is not Animal Crossing, and you are crazy if you think it is, so stop thinking it is super different, okay? Speaking of baked things, the crafting lives are where I personally find a lot of joy. They're all pretty much identical in execution, save for the things that you make in each one. Like, I'll give you 3 guesses what makes the cook life different from the carpenter life. That's right, you need the cook life to make a wooden shelf for your food. Why would you make a carpenter do that? Unreal, get out of here with that kind of talk. And when all of these lives come together, the game just clicks. It takes the tried and true formula of first you mine, then you craft, and just rockets away with it. It's glorious. Like I said, you will need some kind of combat life if you want to proceed with any substantial strides at a time, but the meat and potatoes of the game is in everything else you're able to do. So, for example, you go out and kill a woolly. No. W-O-O-L-I-E, not W-O-O-L-Y, not that one. It's this one. It's different. It's literally different, okay? And the woolly drops some sheep fleece. That sheep fleece can be used to make wool in the tailoring life, and then you can use that wool further in the tailoring life for a nice shirt. or in the carpentry life in tandem with the woodcutting life's haul of wood you've made into lumber to make a cozy chair, or a bow. The choice is yours to make. You can then use that bow to go out and hunt more critters, get their materials and make more clothes, more furniture, more weapons, things like that. And enemies can hit you whilst you're mining for your flint and steel, and when they do so, they'll reset the health bar of your ore deposit, so you'll want to be able to take them out fast to avoid that issue or to exact rapid vengeance on their annoying asses. And then you can take that glorious haul of iron and silver and whatever else, and as a blacksmith, make yourself a new hammer to get better blacksmith abilities, and then make a new sword, or even use some of that wool from earlier and smith yourself a new piece of armor that the tailor life doesn't have access to making. And speaking of the tailor life, you may as well make a new needle for it since you have all these nice new materials to make one, which will only help you later on when you have new tailoring materials to make into a nice hat. But you also remember that there were other recipes you've now unlocked and you wanted to make them earlier, so as long as you're here, you make those too, and then you end up with some great new armor, and then in the armor with your new weapons and tools in tow, you can head out and you can flint and steal the land of vault's resources again, including the resources you couldn't get before, like a bigger enemy that you couldn't damage, or a bigger, cooler tree or rock. The trees and rocks can also be bosses, by the way, and they get the Nobuo Uematsu theme of like, even though the gameplay doesn't really necessitate it, and then you get more materials and you can craft more things. You could talk to the guild master of those lives and level them up and get more recipes, which need more new materials. When you go out and you hunt for those materials and craft more things and kill more things and explore more places and get more things to come back and make more things with them. Like, you see how this game masters the gameplay loop of just one more thing and then I'll go to bed, right? You see how this game can absolutely ruin your entire life in just one weekend, right? But it's all just so good. It's addictive gameplay loop paired with its adorable world design filled with bright, whimsical colors and critters alongside music that's often playful and silly, but in the most endearing possible way, incorporating things like kazoos and rubber duckies and frog croaks and dog barks in some of the songs in a way that really shouldn't work as well as it does, but it just works. It all just comes together, just like the gameplay itself. Its deceptively innocent presentation hides how it feeds into more and more depth in the simplicity of its core playstyle, and it's just unconditionally fun. That's the biggest thing. This game is fun. And the original was fun too, but there's a slew of quality of life updates that make this new installment even more enjoyable and so many little wrinkles. Like, you can change your active life whenever you want. That's new. You don't have to go back to the main hub of the world, talk to a person, and change your active job license to go from fighting a baddie to fishing. You can just face the thing you want to do and press A, and it automatically swaps all of your gear and stats to the appropriate life, and it's so seamlessly good. It is so nice to not have to loop back to areas every time you find a new resource to collect, and instead you can just seamlessly explore everything. Every life has its own goals and ways to buff them up, so every different thing you do is working towards a different set of goals with a different level, and you have the freedom to just wander around and get all those levels up, all without taking breaks at the guild that might cause your real life brain to think, maybe I should save and quit here. No, that's an issue of the past. Now you can whittle away the time without even realizing you're doing so. It is the best. And every aspect of the gameplay is just so charming. The music I've already talked about, but the sound design too. All of the sound effects are all cutesy and crisp, all matched with little animations of your little guy doing little guy things, and it's just a treat for the senses to experience. And I've really only scratched the surface of the world you play in. It's a real big world for your real little guy. Without getting too much into the details, there are 3 general swaths of land you'll be enjoying your adventures in. The Kingdom of Mysteria, where the story itself unfolds. Ginormosia, the, ginormous open world made for a romp around with the lads, which isn't Hyrule, by the way. Stop calling it Zelda. Just because there are towers with giant eyeballs that unlock more of the map, that doesn't make it Zelda, okay? And just because you can find little plant men around the world, that doesn't make it Zelda. They aren't even called Koroks. You are really stretching your logic here to compare that to Zelda. And the green glowing shrines, that's not Zelda either. Stop calling it Zelda. They are their own thing, okay? They aren't Zelda. They did not copy Zelda. Like, look, you can climb cliff sides and dash indefinitely without using any of your stamina. That's something Zelda didn't do, which makes this game not Zelda. Like Breath of the Wild would never. Anyways, the third map location is your own personal island, which you can freely design to be all your own in a way that isn't reminiscent of any other game, including Animal Crossing. Stop calling this game Animal Crossing. It is also not Animal Crossing either. Just because it's little guys on a little guy island you can design with your own cute little guy things does not make it Animal Crossing. And the flowers you collect are nothing like Nook Miles. You are really grasping at straws here, okay? It takes no inspiration from anything. It is its own thing. Do not steal. I put Colin's house next to mine on my island because he's my boyfriend and we're in love, by the way. We're taking things slow, and that's why we're next door neighbors now instead of living together. I mean, look at him. This man is perfection incarnate. He's so pretty. He's literally just dark type Alolan N, and his strangeling form looks like if Vadi was a plush cat, and he's all fancy and pretty and nice like Marth. He's literally all three of my husbandos from my teenage years. God made him for me, actually. He's my comfort character, and I will be expecting a reply to this DM when you have him in boxes and ready to relinquish him to someone who will treasure him like he deserves. You'll spend a lot of time doing, well, everything in the game regardless of how you choose to progress. Hell, I don't think they intended for this, but I ended up spending over 20 hours in the area where you first get your lives unlocked. So like, the tutorial area? Just kind of level grinding and stuff, I don't know. But even in that area, there were things that were higher level than what I could do as a little baby jobling haver, and I didn't want to just not get them. So even though the story had just started and I was supposed to, I don't remember, save someone or something, who cares? I spent 20 hours hitting rocks, but I had the liberty to do that, to make the choice to mess around for hours instead of advancing the plot, and that's really a huge point in the game's design favor. It's probably just as easy to pick one life to start with and barrel on forward with the story as it is to get lost in the weeds of trying every life to see what works best. Like, the game encourages that freedom by design, but I personally feel like it's a much better and easier experience overall for the player to take on all of the crafting and collecting lives. It almost feels like an expectation that you will. I know that at a certain point, you're able to ask your crafting buddies to help you out by making things for you, but I also know just from playing the game that getting things like armor with specific skill slots or weapons of a higher quality is much easier to guarantee if you're the one making them. It's not impossible to progress without all the lives, but it does help out a huge amount. Speaking of your buddies, you'll find a lot of them on your adventure, and all of them have a life assigned to them. And of course, these buddy lives fall into the 3 Cs as well. Combat buddies excel at exactly that. Combat. They'll generally be the most competent to take on adventures with lots of battles. Once you reach a high enough affinity with these buddies, they all have a unique attack or skill they can use in battle. I've got a lot of recent footage of myself with 3 paladins in my party since I'm at the endgame item grind, and you can equip paladins with the most possible item drop rate plus equipment, but my favorite setup is with my long-term partner, Colin, and 2 other pretty men, usually Sloan and Ian. Colin's special skill scared the bejesus out of me when he did it unexpectedly the first time. It's summoning a giant lightning bolt on enemies, and it hits like a truck when it hits. The time it takes him to cast the spell itself is so long that smaller, more live enemies tend to be where the lightning bolt is not when it touches down, but it does tend to hit bigger boss enemies with relative consistency. It hit real hard too. It's just, you know, kinda useless in most regular battles. But, you know, Colin is very pretty, so it's okay. Sloan is also a mage and also really pretty, and his skill heals, which seems to be pretty niche among the buddies, so he's second in command of the pretty boy party. Anything to help me think less while fighting is a boon, and so not thinking about healing is, like, about as good as it gets. Ian is with me in part because he's pretty, but in part because he's a crafting buddy. The crafting buddies, primarily, are best as supporters to boost your crafting abilities when, you know, crafting. They can also be assigned a request to craft something in your stead, but again, that's usually best left to you as the player. They don't do huge damage in a fight either, but what they lack in power they can make up for in utility. Crafting buddies have access to things like bombs and potions, so they're a more supportive role in general. This is especially helpful when you're gathering resources, as when you get low on SP before the collectible is collected, a crafting buddy can top you up with an SP potion, negating the need to back out and try again. That saved me so much time and headache, and is honestly my preference to the third buddy type joining you, which is the collecting type. I'm sure they have their fans, but I'm just not one of them. Yeah, they do help whittle down the health bars of the trees and the fish and the whatever you're trying to gather. And yes, some of them have things like SP saving skills or whatever, but I really don't care. They're more a liability than anything else. See, if you overkill a resource like a tree or a rock, you'll gather extra resources from it, making it easier to stock up on the rare drops and negating the need to do quite as much gathering as you otherwise might need to with these generally more challenging HP sponge resources. Where collecting buddies kind of shoot themselves in the foot is in their sheer incompetence and inability to stop swinging around their tools for you to get that overkill. I can't tell you how many times in trying to max out friendship with every character, I've had a buddy take the last hit of a resource that I was winding up to give a big ol' smack to. It's the opposite of helpful and a liability to progression, because the collecting buddies can, like, smell it if you plan to get the overkill, and by God, is it their mission from heaven above to keep you from doing it. And although from a gameplay angle the collecting buddies are the most annoying, no buddy character is completely free of sin.
I just liked eating waffles all day.
Come on, buddy. Show me what you got.
I'm not finished. Let's get started.
Well, ain't that
First off,
toaster?
oh my God, can you let me do what I need to do?
Now,
Oh my God, what the What?
show me what you've got.
Look, I'm not against character chatter in games. I love the bits of characterization they can bring, especially when you have a party of characters that interact with one another on a story level. I adore Xenoblade Chronicles and all the stupid memes that come from the lines we hear about 10,000 times a minute when playing, because oh my God, do they never shut up in those games. But I think the difference between the chatter in Xenoblade and in Fantasy Life is that there's more meaning to what the Xenoblade cast has to say. Maybe. Their chatter bounces off one another depending on who's in the party. It adds charm and depth to characters by letting their personalities show outside of just the major story beats. The unique dialogue you can get post-battle in the first game that's entirely different depending on which 3 characters you have in your party gives the player more insight and appreciation for the characters' relationships because they're just a merry band of Brits on an adventure. And the post-battle chatter lets you feel more like they're a group of friends than just characters that are together. And can it be annoying to hear that it's rhyme time, baby, and that Charla's rifle's getting hotter, and that the hero pod is very cool! Yeah, I'm sure I can see why many would be turned off by it, but Fantasy Life's idle chatter just doesn't do anything for anyone. By nature of just being cycle-outable party members, the buddies can only have so much depth to their character when they're in your party, and they only get so much dialogue as a result of that. Shoving that chatter in every 2 seconds when you're not even necessarily doing anything the characters are reacting to is a little much, honestly. Like, how many times do I really need to be informed by Layla that we've been walking for a long time? I know, Layla. I've been leading us around. How frequently does Laura have to proclaim she's free as a bird when we're just walking around Gynomosia? I don't know, maybe like once just as we set out, but I don't need reminders. I know you're free as a bird, you bird. How many times do I have to hear Kikyo ask for a foot massage? Literally none. Ideally, you freak. Do your wiki feet thing on your own time. I have rocks to break open and trees to cut down, for fuck's sake. And though there is a lot of the game, specifically the story content, that you'll want to have your buddies around for, there's something to be said for the endgame content being fairly multiplayer reliant. You'll need to grind out a lot of items in both Gynomosia, though I suppose that's easier done solo because of the paladin item drop cheese, and also in something called the Treasure Groves. Treasure Groves are randomly generated dungeons comprising of 10 different floors each. You're required to clear one room on each floor to proceed to the boss at the bottom, which, if you're not ready to take on, can be annoying to go back and prep for. This is where multiplayer comes in. These Treasure Groves can be completed with up to 4 people, and there's incentive to play them with 4 people for the unique currency you get at the end of each run. Doing a solo run nets you 1 goddess fruit, but doing a run with 4 players can net you 5 or even 6 of them. Since these are used to unlock unique recipes and color palettes for your buddies, and even cosmetics for your character, they're worth gathering, and you'll need a lot if you want to get everything that's available. The endgame grind it's really, really, really real. Overall, the game is super fun. You'll spend a lot more time than you realize doing the just one more thing-zing before bed, and it will never ever feel like enough. So much of the game is made to be infinitely playable, especially in the endgame, and that's really a strength overall in a game in the genre Fantasy Life finds itself in. That all being said, I've joked around about this a lot earlier in the video, but I do really need to talk about some of the things that keep Fantasy Life I from being goated, at least in my opinion. For all its strengths, it has a lot of faults, some minor and some major, that I'd like to talk about a bit here, and one of them is its identity crisis. The original Fantasy Life came out on the 3DS over a decade ago, and though many aspects of the game have aged poorly or just been kind of forgotten about, even with those rougher aspects of the original, it had its own unique identity that made it stand out as a title. The bright, vibrant world that connected so many diverse areas in one map, the uniquely styled character designs with many characters looking wildly different from one another yet still maintaining a distinct charm that unified them all. The soundtrack, which again utilized so many non-instruments into it so flawlessly, yet still maintained memorable melodies that stand out as so different than the standard RPG soundtracks you'll hear. The gameplay, which, to be fair, has been refined in Fantasy Life I, which was so perfectly itself in the original. Personally, I'd never experienced a game that let you pick from the start the kind of life you wanted to lead in-game to progress in the world, and allowed for some of those lives to be non-combative, and having a cast of characters that fully embraced their own lives too, and that had a world built around those lives being so close-knit that the gameplay looped just so perfectly around you, indulging in all of them. That was the game's identity. It was Fantasy Life, pure and simple, and there wasn't really anything else like it. Or in other words, it wasn't really like anything else. And and that's dampened somewhat by how much Fantasy Life I borrows from some pretty major players in the Nintendo space specifically. It's like Level 5 saw the major successes of Breath of the Wild and New Horizons and thought, yeah, we can make our game like that. Since 2017, I've noticed a lot of, for lack of a better word, the Breath of the Wildification of games, where there's now a bigger push for a mandatory open world, a huge inventory of a million different kinds of thing, a way to glide over big swaths of land, towers and shrines as warp points complete with puzzles in the shrines, verticality in the worlds that can be climbed with minimal restrictions, things like that. And most of that kind of thing is in Fantasy Life I, and I can't really say it's for the better, to be perfectly honest. Really, it's mostly in Gynermosia, sort of like much of what it borrowed from New Horizons is only found on your customizable island, which, I mean... But at the risk of sounding like I'm all doom and gloom, that I hate everything good in the world, that nothing will ever be good enough for me, and that I'm looking for problems just to complain about them on the internet, Gynermosia feels almost tacked on in some ways. It exists as a large explorable space, yes, and it does have diverse environments and biomes, at least somewhat to break it into distinct parts, but it's Fantasy Life I's replacement for the giant connected overworld of its 3DS counterpart. It doesn't play much into the main story of the game, save for 2 moments I can think of, and even then it's kind of like a, hey, remember that we made this? Please also explore it. And I'll concede that might be in part due to the fact that as soon as I was given access to Gynermosia, I combed over the whole place and unlocked all the warp towers, so I might have maybe ruined whatever it was they were going for to make it meaningful. But counterpoint, it's literally separated from the maps that almost all of the story happens in. So it's like they started making a giant sprawling overworld, didn't find a way to connect the story relevant locations to it without compromising the open world gameplay, and just kinda set it aside. It ties into how I feel about the rest of the world, because really there isn't a connecting overworld you can travel across to get from place to place like in the original. All the story relevant stuff takes place on islands you quick travel to. You never get to really find your way anywhere, you just get told where you need to go next and then you warp there. It makes the world of Fantasy Life I feel a bit hollow, and for a world you spend so much time in, that feels like kind of a waste. There's a lot in Gynermosia to like. I'd argue there's just a lot more to like in the settlements of the story. But the fact that they're not tied together as one big world, especially with there being more power in modern consoles than on the 3DS handheld, is disappointing to me. Especially since, conceptually, Gynermosia is so cool. I mean, a giant continent shaped like a dragon, free to explore however you like? Hello, that rules! I especially love that they named the sections of the continent after the parts of the dragon that you're on. It's such a charming little touch. Like Drake's Snout Range and Drake's Eye Valley on the face, Fangshore Isles on the jaw, and all directions of the Great Gut Plains for the tummy. It goes even further with the caves being named after more specific things, like Nostril Cave on the tip of the snoot, or Great Navel Cave for the belly button, or Worm Maw Cave for the mouth, or... Okay, Level 5. It really does feel as if Level 5 started out with a different idea for Reveria, but shifted focus to make the open world more like Zelda to appeal to more people, since Breath of the Kingdom of Tears of the Wild sold like 10 Zeldillion copies. Like, there's part of the overworld that have ruins, or windmills that are out of use, or even cattle that are just in pens on their own. There's not any human settlements around, and no one ever seems to come and care for the animals, which just gives the impression of one of 2 possibilities. 1, settlements and/or random houses were planned to occupy Gynermosia at one point, and along with these houses would come people that owned the livestock that wander aimlessly in their enclosures. Or 2, someone just left these animals in little prisons to stay for the rest of their natural lives. Just like hoping they'd be able to feed off the grass and also not get eaten by monsters. Like, that's dark, but what else am I supposed to think here? They were left in the game world, surely there must have been a reason, right? Surely it was an intentional choice to leave them in, right? It makes it feel more bleak, if anything, like the animals were abandoned, and I really, really, really hate that. If we as the players could take them in for our island, that would put my heart at ease, honestly. Same with the other little buddies, which, like, I'm sorry, but why are there so many puppy dogs and kitty cats in Gynermosia that we can't even interact with? Like, look at this baby, he wants the fishies, he's hungry and we can catch fish, why can't we give him a fish? And look at this sweet little love bug, he's waiting for the tummy rubs, he wants those tummy rubs. How hard would it have been to let us pet the sweet little bubby bubbers? He's waiting. And look at these frolicking little love bugs. You can frolic with them, but not in a way that actually engages with them. And look at these sweet little blubberses. They're clearly having an important meeting led by this dapper gent, but what's the meeting about? Can we join? Can we help them? Can we pet that dog? In the 3DS game, you were able to adopt up to 3 little buddies to live with you, and they could even join you on adventures, even if they weren't the best for combat assistance. But in Fantasy Life I, you can't even talk to all the animals. Like, for example, this sweet little pupper's in the capital. You can talk to him. Oh my goodness, yes you are, yes you are. And these kitties on the pier, you're able to talk with them as well, and they... Well, I've been called out, haven't I? Anyway, so much of Fantasy Life I is accruing buddies in the form of strangelings and gathering them all on your island of friendship to be potential party members. And since pets in the original could also be party members and could stay in your houses between outings, it just feels like such a no-duh continuation of that to find and keep pets to live on your island. They could even just roam around and play with each other or your residents as an entirely cosmetic addition to add a little more whimsy to the town you've built. And there's already a bunch of animations and poses coded into the game for these animals, so the only extra work would be to put them on the island as little bubby buddy friends. This one's actually kind of criminal. There's no reason to have gotten rid of cute little friends, and even less no reason to not let us pet our babies. Shame on you, level 5. Shame on you. Anyways, relevant to our island and animals, another thing missing from the original 3DS game is multiple houses and multiple pets. In the original, you could have houses in 3 different areas by default and 3 further locations if you had the DLC. I guess it makes more sense to just have the one and done location on your island in this game, but having more houses to call your own and decorate was such a fun little endgame-ish unlock reward that it feels kind of off to not have it as an option here. I assume that this is because, like how there's an absence of a connecting overworld map between settlements, there's an absence of large, bustling settlements in general. I went online to make sure I wasn't just misremembering with rose-tinted glasses. I mean, a good YouTuber would have done research by replaying the original 3DS game in full in preparation for this kind of video, but you're stuck here with me and my ability to Google, sorry. And what I found is that I wasn't remembering incorrectly. The original game actually had bigger towns than we do now, and with more variety and detail in each of them. And that realization just kind of made me feel dejected, to realize that I wasn't just feeling like the world felt less lived in than before, but that it was kind of designed that way. And I think that may be more Breath of the Wildification at play. So much of that iteration of Hyrule was big swaths of nothing but fields, interrupted by small groups of enemies or resources, and that's what this now feels like too. In Gynomosia especially, but in the settlements as well. They feel like they were put in with the bare minimum to count as in-game named locations, and it kinda sucks that it's what we got after the mainline series' decade-long break. From what I understand, the mobile game used the same map as the 3DS game did, so it's not like there wasn't the time to design another detailed world for the next mainline entry. I promise I'll move on from complaining about the entire overworld of the game soon, but I do have 2 more things I'm disappointed by. One is easy to get through. There's no snow or ice area, and those are always the prettiest areas in games, and like, come on. And the other is a bit more explainy, but it's the dungeons and caves of the game. Caves, forests, and just general structures tend to follow a very copy-paste format of generic room, long hallway, generic room, long hallway, generic room, long hallway, and so on and so forth. It's formulaic. It's like they made the maps and the assets for a handful of these map chunks and tied them together with hallways and cardinal directions and just called it a day. It works really well for the treasure groves because by their randomized nature, it makes sense to have assets that slot together like that as a resource saving measure. But for the connecting tissue of the overworld, meh. It's really meh. Like, sure, for some places that are human-made it would fit, but for forests and caves, it's inorganic. It feels kinda lazy? And again, this is something that the original game didn't struggle with, at least nearly as openly. There was variety in the chunks of map that you explored. It wasn't all samey, where you'd see similar map layouts so frequently. And the joining hallways between chunks of maps weren't equidistant straight lines. They'd curve, they'd differ in length, and they'd lead to parts of the sub-areas you were in that were more diverse, that had their own identities and unique appealing traits that made them distinctly memorable. It's these consistent little things in the world design of Fantasy Life I that make it that much more less appealing than the original to me. It's filled out space for the sake of filling out space more than it is creating a lived-in, diverse, unique landscape. It feels more assembled than crafted, if that makes sense. It's utility, not artistic expression. It's kind of vapid? I don't know. It's just lesser than it could have been, and that makes me big baby sad. Though again, that formulaic setup works really, really well for the treasure grove, so if it was isolated to that, I'd have no issues at all. That's the kind of place it makes perfect sense. But even the treasure groves have rooms made up of other rooms you'd go through in the standard cavey dungeony areas of the game. So it's like you're going through the same things a million times in story and in endgame grind both. It kind of feels a little lazy, I really can't lie. Speaking of the groves and the endgame grind, it gets kinda stupid. Treasure groves are a great way to level up your collecting and combat lives and net you the chance to take down bosses that were, until recently, unique to them. They're still very sought after though, so I'm keeping this point in. The issue, however, is that the bosses unique to the treasure groves aren't guaranteed to spawn. See, every time you want to reset a treasure grove, you need to replant a sapling, which will reroll the type of dungeon it specializes in, what floors there are, and what boss you face at the bottom. The issue with this is that you are significantly more likely to get a boss at the end of a treasure grove that can appear either in the overworld of the story or in Gynormosia. So if you're looking to get materials specific to the treasure groves, again, asterisk, I know this was recently changed in an update, you will likely need to reroll a lot to even get a boss spawn that's treasure grove specific, let alone the one you actually need. There's no way to pick that you want a treasure grove that's fishing focused, for example. You just need to get lucky enough to get the specific spawn you want, and some are much more elusive than others. Again, I know that in a recent update they made it so these exclusive bosses can show up in Gynormosia, but I'll loop back to that in a minute. Another wrinkle with the treasure groves that bugs me is the souped-up strangelings. These are bonus floors that randomly appear when you replant your grove, and getting one will give a specific buddy on your team a stat boost once you equip it to them. The issues with these is that, well, for one, they aren't guaranteed on every treasure grove run, and two, they're specific to just one strangeling. So you can't aim for strangelings that are necessarily in your party to buff up, it's just the luck of the draw. But more than that, it's that they aren't guaranteed to show up on a treasure grove run that's the issue. You can get up to 5 of these souped up strangeling things for every strangeling, and there are 50 strangeling buddies. So that means 250 treasure grove runs to guarantee you get to max out your favorite party members at worst. And when you're not even guaranteed a souped up strangeling in every run, you're going to spend a lot of time trying for them. And I really do mean a lot. A treasure grove run can last anywhere from 15 minutes to almost an hour depending on level and if you're playing with multiple people, so it's almost not worth going for these buffs even if you want them for Colin, your beautiful fiancé, as a wedding gift to him, as he deserves it more than anyone else. The more odder wrinkle to that is that the goddess fruits are able to be used for color palette swaps for all your buddies, which is kind of the same idea as a souped up strangeling in that it's random whose you get, but the difference is if you play the boss of the treasure grove with 4 players, you get the 5 goddess fruits guaranteed for one roll of the makeover boxes to get that palette swap. And there are only 4 color options for each character, and one of those is their default, so, 3. So it's possible, if you're hosting bosses and getting 5 fruits at a time and ignoring all the other cool stuff you can get with the goddess fruits, that you can get all the buddy color palettes in 150 runs, which is still not a small amount of time to spend, but it's at least guaranteed at 150 runs. This just makes the endgame feel a bit artificially dragged out for the sake of dragging it out. When you've got favorite buddies, like Colin or Sloan for me, that you want to spoil with the best stuff you can, having randomized access to a randomized chance to do so doesn't feel rewarding at all. It's like a ham-fisted gacha system that really didn't need to be there. It would feel a lot better if, in addition to the grind for goddess fruits, there was some kind of guarantee to get souped up strangelings as well. And after a certain year threshold in the treasure groves to be guaranteed a higher rarity boss. Anything less than that just feels like you're constantly resetting and wasting your time. It's similar to the endgame item grind in Gynormosia when you're trying to get specific legendary challenges to spawn. You get drops from these legendary spawns, currently exclusive to Gynormosia as of writing, that are used to craft the super special of-time weapons and tools, and some of the requirements are no other kind of a lot. If you're lucky, you're getting 2 or 3 of the drop you need from a boss when basically every single true of-time item needs 10, so you need a billion of them to make them all if you really want to. There is a way to force the legendary challenge spawns to reset by changing the difficulty level of a given area in Gynormosia down and then back up again, but you can't guarantee a specific legendary challenge will spawn. You really only need the legendary spud to craft one thing, and you'll need 3 to 10 of the legendary King Wooly drops for most everything else, and when you're resetting for the King Wooly and getting spuds instead, it's just so disappointing. If the materials had been spread out a little more across the legendary challenges, or even the amount needed was reduced, that would have helped so much. I've made the legendary tools for collecting and called it quits after that. You can still craft just fine without the legendary stuff, and there are some weapons with the right skills are plenty potent for the endgame. I guess just picking and choosing the things you really want to craft in the endgame is the way to go. There really isn't a lot of fun to be had in going for them all, and frankly, it's kind of bad game design. Speaking of crafting, I have 3 minor-ish gripes about the crafting process. Well, 2 minor-ish and 1 perhaps not so minor-ish. The big one is maybe more an issue on consoles because I think a turbo button would really fix this, but it's that crafting for more than 3 minutes makes my fingy hurt. All crafting in Fantasy Life requires a series of rapid taps of the A button, and if you're making things that are a higher rarity and wanting to make them in a higher quality, you're going to be rapidly tapping A a lot. And after what's really not a huge amount of time, it causes a lot of stress on the right thumb, and physical discomfort of the player seems like a pretty big oversight, to be honest. I don't personally have any injuries or disabilities that would make the button mashing difficult per se, but I still get a very worn out thumb after crafting sessions and have even cut some sessions short from making everything I wanted to make because of that moderate pain. I would wager that for people who have different needs for accessibility for this type of repetitive button mashing would have a significantly harder time playing the crafting minigames as a result. This is a problem for general progression, as there are heaps of recipes to collect. After all, 6 of the 14 lives in-game are crafting lives, and that's nearly half. So if you're like me and you really want to make at least one of everything, or remake items as many times as it takes to get certain skill slots unlocked, or, heaven forbid, you want to make more than one shrub at a time to decorate your island, seriously, let us bulk craft these at 99 at a time or something. There is never a need for only 1 or 10 shrubs, especially when you can make 99 stickers at a time, for goodness sake. The amount you'll be tapping the A button really does add up. And for a game like Fantasy Life, which is designed with constant progression as a core element of its gameplay, I don't know, I just think that it's an oversight that really should have been considered during playtesting. That's the most egregious wrinkle of crafting, but I still want to whine about 2 other things. One is the menus for craftable items. I like that you can craft anything at any crafting table, like you can just walk into a restaurant and forge a sword. That's kinda cool. But because of the sheer amount of things that can be made, there's a pretty cluttered menu screen to sift through if you're looking for just one item. I know there's a filter button, and that does help, but I think that having a menu of the 6 crafting lives as options for when you get to a crafting table might be beneficial for narrowing down the lists from the start. Like, if I could just select the cooking life and have subfolders for different dish types instead of the default just being all of the dish types in its own tab, that would be really nice. Another thing that could really help is if they brought back the dyeing feature for clothes from the 3DS. In the original game, you used to be able to dye so many of the clothes that you made different colors, allowing for customization of so much of your wardrobe. But in Fantasy Life I, you're not able to dye anything, which is already kind of a bummer, but then you have a bazillion armor sets or witch costume sets that come in different colors with different recipes, and it's like,
but I want to die!
Wouldn't letting people just be able to choose what color they want their outfit to be a lot smoother to implement in-game? To make the technically same thing multiple times adds a lot of bloat to both the recipe catalog and to your item menu. And since there's already the ability to change your appearance separate from the armor you have equipped for skills, so you can have the cosmetics that you like instead of your ass-kicking outfit, it just again feels really redundant to have a million of the same thing when you could just, pick colors from a menu instead.
Why won't you let me die?
The bloat just really gets to me. I don't know, that could just be a me thing, though. The other maybe just me complaint is the icons for the crafting lives. Really mostly for the blacksmith life, though. Both the carpenter life and the blacksmith life have hammer icons that look incredibly similar and have the tap command to use, but they're on different spots on the crafting table. And when you're making a million different things and jumping between the lives to do so, it can be frustrating in how easy it is to see a hammer icon and default to the left instead of the center, or vice versa. Yeah, skill issue, get good, it's not that hard to learn. Okay, first of all, shut up, and second of all, it's stupid they did it this way. I'm the one making the video. My word is law now. The other thing that gets me a lot is the forceps icon for blacksmithing. Since all the animations for blacksmithing have your character holding the forceps, I'll occasionally jump to the water on the right since that's where you see them most prominently, instead of the coal pit to heat the metal in the middle. It doesn't help that both of these tasks can be press and hold either, so again, it's just something that's irritating more than anything. And possibly just me, but come on, just make a fire icon. It's so easy. I know I've complained a lot the last, 7,000 hours about Fantasy Life I, and I wouldn't blame you for thinking that I hate the game and everything that it is, but that really couldn't be further from the truth. I love Fantasy Life I. adore it even. I've put over 200 hours into it at time of writing, and I have no doubt that as DLC updates roll out, that number is just going to continue crawling up and up and up to the most degenerate of playtimes. It's just that it's hard to not compare a new game in a series to its predecessors, you know? Especially when the original was such a perfect little nugget of a game, equal parts cozy simulator and action RPG with a delightfully distinct story and cast that really brought its charm to another level. I know I said earlier that a good YouTuber would have gone back and played the original game in full before making these kinds of statements, and though I haven't done a full second playthrough of the original, or really a huge amount of a playthrough to be honest, it felt really wrong to make the claim that the 3DS had much stronger aspects to it without actually going back and playing it again. And even in the short few hours I spent in classic Riveria, I felt a huge wave of charm that Fantasy Life I is kinda lacking in. And by classic Riviera, I really mostly mean Castell, because oh my god, did they jam-pack this starting town with oodles and oodles of charm and goofiness. I think the graphical limitations of the 3DS allowed for them to use really potently bright and striking colors to the world's advantage, which really helps to lend the game its own identity, especially when the character designs were a bit more daring in how silly some of them were. I'll get back to that in a bit. But like, even with characters that aren't really story relevant, you get some real oddballs right off the bat. In Fantasy Life I, when you start out a new life, the Life Masters and fellow Life Havers are generally really cool about getting you where you need to go to succeed, and they are on the 3DS too, but they're also way more offbeat. Like, in starting the Hunter life, Fern wants basically nothing to do with you and sends you to her other trainee, named Huntin' Pete. Huntin' apostrophe Pete. What a name, and he is such a smug asshole. He's like Groose, if Groose was somehow worse than Groose at the start of Skyward Sword. This dude sucks, I totally love him. He sees you as a lesser and a rival and is so unbearably smug about it that he barely even tries to help you out in your hunting life initiation. So when you quickly triumph over the literal tutorial, he slips right into sore loser territory. And it's made that much funnier that in addition to you being praised by his peers, you're praised by his own grandma, who basically says he sucks and you're cool. It's so funny and memorable and unique. I can't really think of a starting quest that's that funny in Fantasy Life I to acquire your new skills. There are paint-by-number processes in both games, yes, but there's more character to each character in the 3DS game. They've all got quirks, wants, places in the world. But in Fantasy Life I, it feels so much more like they're there to guide and then just vibe forever. Douglas even has more character in the original, and he's already a pretty fun buddy to have an eye. I entirely forgot about his quirk of swapping around letters in consecutive words when talking. It's such a little thing, but it makes him stand out as a person and a character rather than just a guy you meet and then bench. The characters are, well, characters. They're distinct, they're fun, they're kinda weirdos. In Fantasy Life I, we didn't get nearly as many off-the-wall oddballs in the entire game as we do in just the starting few hours as Fantasy Life OG. I think that the closest we came is with the man who lost his family to his crippling corn addiction. No, I'm not doing a TikTok censor word. He literally lost his family to a literal corn addiction. What's his deal? Why is he here? He's got a little house on the outskirts of the capital and he just kind of hangs out in his corn-riddled abode. I want to talk to this NPC more. I want his dialogue to evolve as the story goes on, but he just kind of exists as a one-off and that's all there is. Whereas, in the original, you tired of me saying that yet? Even the NPCs in town can be bizarre little dickheads. Think Animal Crossing on the GameCube, when sometimes the cute little animal villagers would tell you were ugly and you sucked, and also to give them your cool cabinet, and then they would just move out the next day without any real reason to do so, leaving you there like, the hell was their problem? What did I do? That's the exact vibe you get from half of these town people. They either tell you that you're some nobody loser, or they say the most out-of-pocket random nonsense you could ever imagine, then ask things of you like that's how normal conversations go with strangers. They're weird, they're rude, they're goofy. I love them. I think more so than anything else, that's where my disappointment lies in Fantasy Life I. When the original Fantasy Life came out on 3DS, it was just so unapologetically itself. The world was filled with bright, vibrant colors and distinct environments. The soundtrack, which we've been listening to today, found a unique balance of themes that bring to mind a grandiose adventure with goofy little plink plunks and other sounds that just scream childlike wonder. It let its character dialogue be offbeat and weird and led to some really funny lines that are so sorely lacking in Fantasy Life I. Well, intentional ones anyway. We make our own fun where we can find it. It took itself only as seriously as it really needed to, just enough to push along a heartfelt narrative in a giant cozy world, which allowed it to be silly, allowed it to spread its wings and stand out as Fantasy Life instead of a game like XYZ. And this could have just been my experience, but it wasn't like any other game in any major way because it was like itself, most of all. It didn't wear its inspiration so brazenly as Fantasy Life I does, and that's really to Fantasy Life I's detriment, for me at least. So much of its core being is a mix of trying to find success where others have, in more than one angle. We've gone over how it's similar to Breathy Teary Wild Kingdom and New Horizons a bit, but I think it's also worth noting what it's pulled from mobile games as well, mostly in the character designs. The original 3DS title had its share of pretty characters, sure, but the majority of the cast looked like Mii's you'd make when you were 8 because they looked as funny as possible, and then you just left them to rot on the Wii Plaza forever. In contrast, characters that were introduced in the mobile game, like Sloane, Snow, or Kanugi, to name a few, are all glammed out to the max as prime waifu/husbando material. And even some returning characters got a yassification for the mobile market. That makes a lot of sense, since gacha games in the mobile market are really reliant on appealing characters to bring in a profit, but it does kind of alienate some of the cast in a kind of designy tonal dissonance, you know? Don't get me wrong, building off an already existing idea or premise to improve its execution can make for an incredible experience for a game. Like, the Headroom takes everything I wish New Horizons terraforming and island decorating could have been and turned it up to 11. But it can also really fall flat when there's a fundamental discrepancy between taking inspiration from a contemporary and not considering how to make it work. And though Fantasy Life as a series can thrive from continuing to learn from the successes of its peers, in some ways that's to its detriment, I feel. Fantasy Life was always an incredible experience on its own merits on the 3DS, and in a lot of core ways I feel like it's the superior game because of those merits. But the strides made from the 3DS days to now are proof that Fantasy Life as an IP can grow and thrive with its own place in the market. I just hope to see more of Fantasy Life being Fantasy Life in the future, striding into the spotlight on its own strengths over its inspirations. The successes it's seen on its second mainline debut just show how much staying power it can have in the gaming space, and I truly look forward to seeing how far it can go from here. Also, I cannot stress enough how much I miss having dogs in the party. Look at this little bubby. He is such a sweet little babes. He's such a sweetheart. I love him. Level 5, you've got to bring pets back. You did it like 12 years ago. You can do it again now. I believe in you. Thank you so much for watching until the end. Have you all also been enjoying Fantasy Life I? If you've played the original, what are your thoughts on the new entry in comparison? How do you feel about the soon-to-be implemented roguelike mode in Gynomosia? As always, I love talking with you all in the comments, so I hope to see you there. With that, I hope you have a great day, staying happy and healthy as always. Take care. Bye.